I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I've been wanting to attend these MAPS conferences for years, and finally I live close enough again to be actually able to make it. I'm back to Europe, so that is fantastic. And I believe that this is the last talk for today, so please bear with me. I know it's been a long day, and I try to be as brief and entertaining as possible. My talk here is going to take us away from social media again and bringing us back to artworks that live online. I'm going to be talking about the collaborative research that we conducted at the Guggenheim when I was still there in my former role as senior conservator of time-based media, where I was in charge of the video artworks, the software and computer-based works, the sound, slide, film, and performance artworks. The software and computer-based pieces were definitely the most challenging and complex pieces that we had to deal with. They were very diverse in nature. Some of them just lived online. Others were installation-based and connected to the internet. Most of them had custom software or modified hardware. And of course, what all of them had in common was the underlying source code that determines the different behaviors and the experience of the artwork, the color, the movement, the interactivity, the randomization, etc. And because I'm a traditionally trained conservator and I'm not able to read or write source code, I knew that I had to collaborate with specialists who can do if I wanted to responsibly do my job and care for these collections. So I launched the CCBA initiative at the Guggenheim, the Conserving Computer-Based Art Initiative, and I was very, very lucky to be able to find a wonderful partner in Professor Dina Engel of the Department of Computer Science at the New York University. We collaborated for 5 years, and we are still doing so. And every semester over the course of those 5 years, Professor Engel recruited her most talented undergraduate computer science students who systematically conducted source code analysis of our collection artwork, which means that we're able to work together with them to really deeply understand the behaviors of our, in part, very historic computer-based artworks. We invited the artists to the lab. We also made a habit out of inviting other colleagues from other institutions in New York to our lab to discuss the case studies, and some of you here in the room have actually been to these meetings as well. And most importantly, we were able to raise the funds for a dedicated CCBA fellowship, which was held by Jonathan Fabowitz for 3 years. Who was tasked with a systematic survey of all of our software and computer-based artworks, and who supported every step of documenting these works and devising treatment strategies where that was necessary. And I'll be talking in the frame of today's conference about the 3 web artworks in the collection: Shuli Chang's Brandon, John F. Simon Jr.'s Unfolding Object, and Mark Napier's Net Flag. So these 3 web artworks in the universe of web art are ancient, like dinosaur pieces. They are between 15 and 20 years old, and they were all commissioned by the Guggenheim for the permanent collection at the time. And they all included technology called Java applets, which is no longer supported by contemporary browsers. And in Shuli Chang's Brandon, I'm gonna play this video while I talk about it. Hang on. Yeah, in Shuli Chang's Brandon, the Java applets are responsible for animating the text and the images. This is a sprawling web artwork over 80 pages, pop-up windows, and it tells the tragic story of Brandon Tina, a trans man who got raped and murdered in the 1990s. If those Java applets do not work properly due to the browser, then it looks like this. And I'm going to let Jonathan Fabowitz navigate you through this.
If I click on the detour link here...
Oh, are we not connected? Are we not connected to the audio? Oh.
Maybe it's out, plugged. Yeah. Here it is.
All right, no worries. No, it's not playing at all.
Kérhetünk egy jelet?
Okay, I'm going to take us back and do this. Just give me a sign when you want me to start. Sorry, we tested this and it was okay when we tested it, but something has happened to the settings. Should I try? Try? Yeah? Okay.
So if I click on the detour link here, this should take me to the MooPlay interface. So you're just seeing a blank page here. I'll click the top of the syringe to open the surgery applet. This would have been displaying some random pictures of surgery.
So you can already tell it's very hard to basically create a condition report of a piece if you don't know what you're actually not seeing. And in the case, unless you look at the source code or you have documentation, valid documentation of the piece when it was still all working. In the case of Brandon, the Java applets were embedded in the HTML. The HTML is still working, so you can see great parts of the piece, but then certain features of it are simply not being displayed properly. In the case of John F. Simon Jr.'s unfolding object, the whole piece is one single Java applet, and I'm going to play in the background here. So basically how this works, this is a piece from 2002. It's an interactive piece just like Brandon. Brandon is interactive as well. And you click on those little pages that then unfold depending on the quadrant that you click onto. It unfolds in a certain direction. And you can basically build your own artwork, you unfold your own artworks, and those nuances in color and the lines that you're seeing actually represent previous visits by other users that access the piece online. So the horizontal and vertical lines and diagonal lines stand for 10 users or 100 users or 1,000 users that have entered that before. So this is a very early trace of interactivity or visualized interactivity online, and was very exciting at the time. When those Java applets stopped to be supported, the whole piece simply looked like this. This is a very stressful site if you work at a museum and you're a conservator in charge of those works, and there's a very high expectation towards these works because they're online. They should be democratically accessible to everyone 24/7. This is a 24/7 exhibition that goes forever, and it's whenever it's down for maintenance or down to fix a bug or to make updates, you actually get calls from the artists, from scholars, from educators who complain that the piece is not up and running properly. So this is a very high pressure scenario and very unlike other collection care activities where you actually have downtimes in a collection care life cycle. So in our research, we had two questions that we really wanted to address. The first question was, what is the conservation object here? What is it that we're trying to preserve in these pieces? How important is the source code in here? Are we just trying to preserve the experience of it? Because it would be easily just rebuilt in a different programming language or in a different technology. Or is there some significance to the actual original source code? And the second complex of question pertains to the actual treatment. So if you decide that you can't help the piece just with emulation, and you have to go to migration and actually cut into the code and treat the code by recoding, by messing with the original code, are there methods that are more ethical than others? Is there a way that we can develop methods that keeps us in compliance with our code of ethics? Because conservators, comply to a code of ethics. We're looking for treatment detectability. We are looking for treatment reversibility, and we have to document our work. So how do you do this with web art? So the first question was to find out what kind of significance can we attach to source code? What are the scenarios where source code reveals something about the artist way of production that is significant and preservation worthy. And we identified in our research 3 areas, which I'm going to show to you briefly. One is the significance of the original technology. The second is the significance of the original programming language. And the third is the significance of the original coding style that someone has. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. An example for a significance of the original technology is this piece here by Paul Chan. This is a floor projection, and I have a little bad YouTube video here for you as well. It reminds you a little bit of moonlight projecting the window across onto your bedroom floor or whatever, and drifting past are these fragments of debris, basically. And what looks like a video here is actually a computer-based work that is live executed off of a computer every time that you start it. It's not a generative work, so it repeats itself every time. It's the same thing, 14 minutes every time I play it, but it's being played as an executable file off of a computer. So my first thought as a conservator was, of course, I want to not get into too much work. I want to have a solid solution. I want to avoid emulation or any sticky territory like that. So I asked the artist, Paul Chan, can we just export it as a video? Because we had the flash files. We could basically just create a video. The user would not, or the audience in the museum would not sense any difference whatsoever. It would look absolutely identical. The experience would be identical. And this is how what he answered to me. He said, I think the use of Flash connects to my Spartan mentality. I like Flash because of the control and the precision and the dirtiness of it, the roughness of the vector images, but I also love the fact that when I kick out that animation, it's like 150K. I don't want to ever imagine me making a work that would take up 10 terabyte, like a video or something. I want it to be as elegant and as compressed as possible. So video was an absolute no-go, and he wants the piece to maintain, to be maintained in that technology. So you know, it's a Flash piece, and it has to be executed as such. This is the significance of the original technology in Paul Chan's work and oeuvre. Second example, the significance of the original programming language. There's a piece by Sibren Verstig. It too looks like a video, but it's actually, these are live animated images. What was done in Macromedia Director, the native programming language here is a language called Lingo. At the time when the artist wrote this piece in 2006, Macromedia Director and Lingo were already kind of outdated, and people were turning away from it. The names that you see here, what looks like the start and end credits of a movie, are actually names that are imported in real time from the internet. On the one hand side, you see birth announcement, and the other side, these are obituary listings. So these are actual people that were born and passed away in real time. When the 20-year-old computer science students scrutinized Sibren Verstig's choice of language, programming language, and thought that it could be done much more elegantly with more contemporary technologies, the challenged artist replied this. Yeah, I still use Lingo, I still use Director. I mean, I think in it now. When I start thinking about projects, I think through that language and how that might be possible in that format. The authoring environment is so self-enclosed and simple, and there's no external compilers needed, and there's no external libraries needed. I like the solipsism of it. This is my medium. And this is a really important statement. You know, as someone interested in technical art history, you can say a piece, an authentic piece by Sibren Verstig is most likely scripted in Lingo. And that connects us back to the whole world of painting, you know, people who only works on acrylics or who have certain ways of producing artwork. So Macromedia and Lingo is actually like a really important part. And when you look for an appropriate conservation strategy, then you don't want to port that into a different language. My last example for the significance of source code is the original coding style. Oh, by the way, what I learned from my research partner, the computer scientist Professor Engel, was that it's actually common parlance among programmers to say that they have a native, like a mother tongue, a programming language that they grew up in or express themselves in most fluently. And that, I think, also is a very important notion to be aware of, that it's the programming language that someone chooses to express a certain idea, a visualized idea, can be very, very important. Same with the coding style. The coding style in Brandon is also peculiar because so many people worked on it together.
So Garland's the only
I didn't want to show you that. But what's really interesting here is the way that the styling is done in HTML. So the size of the fonts, the colors of the fonts, etc. Is usually done in CSS cascading style sheets. These are files outside of the actual body of HTML, which make it very easy to unify the style across many pages within one web project. And this is commonly done, the styling is commonly done with CSS today. And it was already around at the time of creation of Brandon, but either deliberately or not deliberately, the artist and the other collaborators chose not to use CSS. So all the styling is actually written into the HTML. And when we restored Brandon, we respected that, and we did not add styling where we had to correct misinterpreted fonts via CSS. So this brings me to a very, my next important topic, the second part of the research questions. Are there treatment methods that are better than others? How do I optimize my own treatment to adhere to basic principles in conservation? And one basic principle in conservation is that you want to minimize your intervention. And we have learned a big time, like 40 years ago, when there was a little tear in a painting, it was still commonly lined. The whole painting was basically glued onto a support canvas, and it was like a huge measure for a tiny problem. And nowadays, like in the medical world, we are much more on the side of minimal intervention. We wanted to just treat the damage where the damage is and not add more or blur the original more than absolutely necessary. And we wanted to find out if that's the case for code as well, because oftentimes it's not the whole code that is defunct, it's just a few lines or a block of code. So we did everything to really just treat that defunct code to reduce our restoration to where it was absolutely necessary, instead of migrating the entire code, good or bad, into a new programming language or a new technology. And I'm going to show you one example of this minimal intervention, which pertains to the blink tag. So I'm going to, this is also a video, I'm going to, there we go. So you see this blinking, this was very fashionable at the end of the 90s, like this blinking text online. I think people grew sick of it over time, which is why browsers no longer support the blink tags. And when we first looked at Brandon, we didn't actually know that there was so much text that was supposed to blink and was simply no longer shown as blinking text. Only when we did the source code analysis did we find out that there were these original blink tags here. This is a blink tag, which means all the text that is added between the blink tags is told to blink. And these little tags are the tags that are no longer interpreted by contemporary browsers. So what we did, instead of completely overwriting this, is to write a function outside of those blink tags that just tells, says, go and look for those blink tags that look like this and make the text blink that is situated between those blink tags. So it's basically, we're basically externally animating those those blink tags again without removing them or deactivating them. In other words, if this is the original source code and we're cloning the whole code to make a restoration code out of it, we are resituating blocks of the original and functional code and basically animate it from the outside. And we coined the term code resituation for this, and we also just published a paper that introduces this. I'm going to show you a slide with further reading later. You can take a snap of that. The detectability and reversibility is a really important notion in conservation. So the Code of Ethics of the American Institute for Conservation, and there are codes in Europe as well, they're all more or less the same, says any intervention to compensate for loss should be documented and detectable. Such compensation should be reversible and should not falsely modify the known aesthetic, conceptual, and physical characteristics. So documenting what you are adding to it so that your code additions are not mistaken for original code is a really crucial step. And in addition to traditional conservation documentation reporting that is done anyway for every treatment, we had to find ways to really find and locate and to detect the various tweaks that we had to make in hundreds of different of files. And that was by commenting inside the code. So first of all, as I just showed you, you never delete original code. You basically create a restoration copy of it. So that already serves the reversibility issue in the digital realm. It's a lot easier than with physical unique objects. And instead of deleting this code, this is all active code but defunct, it doesn't create the desired properties anymore, you basically comment it out. So it's now grayed out, as you can see. This means the machine will no longer read this passage of code, but it's still there. For anyone who wants to do source code analysis and see what the artist did and what we did later, all the code is still there, it's just no longer active. Another measure that we did was to annotate the code with comments. This, by the way, is a practice that is done by programmers all the time anyway. They annotate their own code to make mental notes. This code is supposed to be doing this and that. This code is supposed to be doing this and that. And here we're saying, hey, this is our restoration by programmer XYZ on this and this date. We're doing this because this, and this is the header, and this is where the new code starts, and this is where the new code ends. So we're actually using a programming tool, code annotation, to mark within the source code, delineate between original and restoration edition. We also used GitHub as a version control tool to basically check in all of the different tweaks that we had to do to bring these works back to working order online. A nice feature about GitHub is that you can compare the old and the new code, the old and the new code. And this already brings me to my conclusion, which are 3 points for you today. One is, consider the possible significance of the source code. It doesn't mean that you have to preserve the source code in any instance. It's just possible that it is preservation worthy. The second is scale and adjust your treatment with preservation in mind. So for some treatments, emulation might be a better approach to pursue. With others, it may be code intervention. If it's code intervention, think of the elements that you can preserve, like original algorithms, for example. And the third is, and that was a great relief and insight for us, is that the current Code of Ethics, although it was written in 1994 by the AIC, is actually still useful orientation for the development of new practices in this new and emerging conservation area. I promised you the slide with the further reading. All of the research I just presented to you has been published. This is in the JAIC, in the Electronic Media Review, in the Digital Humanities Quarterly, and we wrote 4 different Guggenheim blogs. The third web artwork I just showed you, NetFlag, and I didn't talk about it due to time constraints, has just been restored like a week ago. They completed it, and there should be a relevant blog post online very soon as well. I would like to thank the artist, my former colleagues at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, my colleagues at the New York University, and the supporters of the CCBA initiative at the Guggenheim. Thank you.